Alright folks, welcome back again to the Painting the Silent King with a makeup brush challenge here. So we have our trusty makeup brush and we're going to get back to the throne. As you can see, I have repaired the throne here. All I did was drill a couple of holes into the back of the stairs and into the throne itself using this drill here. This is a 1/64th drill, which is exactly the right size to be able to cut up a paper clip and insert it into both of the holes, and then I was able to use that to reinforce. So we're going to actually do the same thing to the base on this today that I've done on these Menhirs to get them going. So we're going to have this lightning effect here on the base. We're going to increase that effect around these two little small ones. We're going to repair some of this that has this basing material that got on there. And so we're going to spend most of our time working on the base for the Silent King's throne today, so that this piece of it will be done. Then we're going to spend a little bit more time working on the lighting effects for these guys. So we're going to come back in here. We're going to see these balls here and some of the eye area. We're going to go ahead and put the object source lighting effects in today and work on the blades. So we'll see how far we get. We might not get fully to the blades, but we should get to finish at least this part here. And I tried the plinth last time. I continuously kept it out of frame during the use of the plinth. So I'm going to try just again holding on to it, and hopefully we don't end up breaking any parts. But this guy has turned out pretty well just using our makeup brush. Alright, so I'm going to start down here by cleaning up some of the mess, and for that we are going to need our pure white. I'm going to get my palette here. I don't have the palette cam anymore. I have replaced it with nothing because most of you have now seen me mix these paints up. So you should be able to see this here. Might be some glare over here, so I'm actually going to pull that out of the frame. I am working with some additional lights here. I'm going to turn this light down just a tad. So this is just kind of figuring out life, seeing what really needs doing. Alright, I can also change out, let's see, what gives me a better look here. It's a little bit warmer light. Let's try that out. Let's see if that helps here. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to grab some of this. I'm going to put a little touch of water here on, and we're going to clean up this area here. So this is where this has been touched by the basing material. Same thing here. I'm just going to come in, find those spots, and we're going to fix them up. Same thing in here. I'm just going to be holding it by the base here. So this is going to be where we see a little more. We're going to have that in here. I am going to connect these bits here just because I think that makes a little more sense. And I'm going to fuzz the edge here of this so that I can come back in and fix that, so that we do have a nice glow effect occurring. Let's see if you can see in there. There we go. So I'm just fuzzing the edges here, taking my white paint, coming in, and this is just a stipple motion here. Now in a moment we're going to come in and dry brush this whole thing down using our different colors here. Excuse me. But this is for the lighting effect, and I do want it to be drying up while I'm doing the rest. So that's why we're in here doing this way. And just finish that up right around there. Alright, so we have a nice kind of irregular looking pattern here to this, where the lightning is hitting the ground. And that's what I'm going for. Oh, and I'm hitting the camera too for a nice irregular filming session. This is pre-recorded. This is over Christmas break here in 2022. So I am unavailable to do my normal stream here. But I have these pre-recorded for you. And now that we have our lighting effect in, we're going to come in here with some Army Painter's Arid Earth. We're going to be dry brushing this across the whole of the base here. So I'm going to clean off this nozzle here. You don't want any kind of large bits to fall in. Alright, just had a little mute there for a sneeze. So I'm going to put some Arid Earth on my palette. I'm going to wet my brush, get most of it out, grab some of that paint. And then I'm going to remove most of it, and I'm going to very carefully pick up my model here, and I'm going to start to dry brush here out from the edge, or I should say out from the center portion. And so this is just picking up a lot of the texture here so that we can see that. I'm doing this pretty lightly. I definitely don't want to overdo this, but I'm coming out from the light source there. A little more of that, wipe some out. Again, pulling from the light source out. And where it's really tall, there's places here that, won't really get hit all that much. That's okay. Don't feel like you have to hit every little bit. You want to kind of keep this to the tops where the ridges are at. And then we're going to have a little bit of a burnt effect come off of this with some darker grays around where the lightning's at. And this is overall a pretty quick, pretty simple way of doing your base. There's definitely nothing, particularly special about what I'm doing here. So that was that Arid Earth there. Now I can see a few spots right in here where that Agrax Earthshade did not get, and I'm going to rectify that real quick, because if I don't, I think those will kind of stand out here, and I definitely don't want that. So I'm going to grab a little bit of Earthshade in here, and I'm going to be very careful while trying to film. It's really easy to knock this over. I'm actually going to come right in here, and I'm going to get that down in that little divot, divot number 1 and divot number 2. And I'm just going to be on the lookout now to see if I see any more of those little holes, which I don't. There's some along this side, which I guess I'll take care of here just in case when I ring this base with black, it still is visible. That way I don't have to push any black onto the base. But here we go. All right, and so normally I would mix up some more just white with black here to get kind of a nice medium gray, but I am going to pull in some of this P3 gray here, just to save myself a little bit of time. And this is called Iron Hull Gray. This is just a medium tone gray that is made by P3 that has some pretty good coverage. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. You know what? That didn't mix all that well. I'm going to put you on mute and put it on the spinner. All right, there you are. Oh, that's much better mixed. I'm going to grab some of this. I'm going to bring this to the middle here. All right, we have ourselves here a nice medium gray. I'm going to darken it down just a little bit because I'd like to be able to do 2 of these. So we're going to come in here with just a little black, get that mixed in the middle of our palette to bring this gray down just a bit. There we go. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and wipe that out, wash out my brush. And we want this lighting effect on the bottom here, the one I just put in, to have a little bit more of a volume to it. And actually what I see happening is I'm going to come in here with some pure white while we're doing that, and I'm going to put that in here. And I'm going to go over, just over the areas that I already was on, because I can see those are going to be really patchy when I put in the rest of the effect. So I want to capitalize on that and have it where I want it to be pretty pure looking. I want it to actually be that way. And so I'm just going right over that. Sweet. Alright, I'm going to clean that back out here. Now I'm going to grab some of this darker gray. Actually, I'm going to grab some of the lighter gray first. That's the direction I want to go. So I'm going to touch just a little bit to my white, just to give me just a little bit brighter gray here. And now I'm going to come in with this gray, and I'm going to blend it in. It's going to blend into the edge here. Touch a little bit more white to bring this up just a tad. There we go. And so really all I'm doing is coming along the edge of the white that I've just done, and I'm adding a little bit of gray here, where maybe this is kind of hot, maybe this is something that is, you know, hurting, damaging the soil, just to give it a little bit more visual interest, something interesting here. Don't need to go crazy with this step. Now I'm going to grab some more, a little bit darker, and I'm going to come a little further out so they have a few kind of concentric rings. This is a pretty big base, and so for this particular model, I think it is worth it to go ahead and add some visual interest here that's not just, you know, a couple of grass tufts. There's nothing wrong with grass tufts, but when you have this much space to work on, you might as well do it. So I'm going to come a little further out and put my final color on here. And again, I'm just stippling this in. This is definitely not, you know, anything particularly amazing that I'm pulling off, other than stippling in these gray colors going from light to dark that you can see. And so then you kind of get this effect of it burning the ground down there. And I can see an area that's going to be slightly problematic over here. So I'm going to grab some of my white, and you can see it too probably, that area right under there. It missed getting white paint because there's a little tiny divot-y thing that I want to catch. Same thing here. There we go. Nice, so now we have kind of a little effect that's going on here, which is great. So we're going to basically do the same thing we've done on the others, and I might actually come back to these before I'm done and increase that effect. I'm not entirely sure I got it exactly the way I wanted the first time on this, and so that I might go back and we'll do just a little touch up on. I'm going to grab some more of this arid earth here, wipe out most of it, and then give some of this just a little more, just coming across, give some of my highest spots just a little extra, especially as they come away from the light source. Because when this is all dried up, we're actually going to apply some more of our glow effect. So now that we've seen that, let's take a look at these menhirs one more time. That ends rather abruptly there. So let's do something similar. We're going to come in. This is the menhir that was already kind of done, but Let's go ahead and fuzz this area here just a little more, because it looks to me that it was just a little too abrupt where the lightning was. And so this is not going to be a ton, but I do want to do some. That was a lot of white right there. Let's grab that up. I do want to do some to fuzz this area, and then we're going to come back with our effect, our lighting effect, and then go over that again. That was just too sharp, and it doesn't match this one. So don't ever be afraid to kind of fix this kind of thing. You definitely don't want to be, redoing whole models, but this small effect here, just increasing it so that they'll match nicely, seems like a good use of our time. And we're going to hit all these kind of at the same time in here. And so we'll make this kind of just, all over the place in there. There we go. Excellent. So now I feel like that matches quite a bit better. It removes the sharp line that was created by the original structure that's underneath all that. Cool. Now, as I've said before, we definitely want to make sure that this base is totally dry before we go and start messing with the fluorescent inks. We want to make sure they're totally dry. This white all has to be dry. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that fluorescent ink is a transparent paint. The one we're using in particular is called Tezzeret Glow. So that is basically a color that looks very much like moot green, but it's mixed with a fluorescent dye. Now the issue is that it's transparent, and if you mix white into it, it becomes opaque. It's no longer transparent, so it kind of looks like green milk whenever it's on something, versus you getting the effect of looking through a translucent paint and then seeing something behind it. So we're very careful with that. That being said, because that's what we've done here, we've got this effect lined up on this, we've got this effect lined up on these. I'm going to put these away to let them dry, so they're just going to go up on the shelf. And we're going to go ahead and pull out our guys here from our last episode. So, just as a reminder, this is Cesaric and his two minions, the ones that are on the throne. Last time, we worked on getting all the base coats in, then building up to this gold color that you see on them right now. We also put in the effect for the stone that's on there. Now that it's dried, I think we might add a little bit more green back to it. And that way it matches what we've done a little closer. Then we need to work on the lighting effect, so we need to get our whites on. And then we need to do the blades. So that's what I'm going to start with these guys. First, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of extra green back to our warp stone. And for that, I'm going to come in with some Wizard Orb. In this episode, you are going to see me jumping around a little bit. This is me starting to take care of all of the bits and pieces that remained. So all the things that are kind of left to do. So we have this. In fact, this actually needs a little more of the Goblin Green in, I feel, just to make it match a little better to what we've already done. So I'm just putting a small amount of Goblin Green on my palette. I'm not going to add any water to this. And I'm going to take it, and we're going to come in towards the bottom of these areas. And we're going to add that green back in. For this one, I'm going to go a little more centered. There we go. All right, so that's on this. And then I'm going to come only on the bottom part of this gem and add in this green down here. And then same thing over here, going to add this green in. And then here, have just a touch of the blue in to bring that back up on this side. Yep, so I'm just pushing that on there with a little stipple motion. And there we go. So we have our stones there. Now one could make the argument that I could pull this all back down with just a little bit of shade, and I might do that for the stones here. Mostly because it's such a small area, it's hard to get them to match. But I'm going to leave it be for now. What I am going to do at this point is start working on these white areas, the places that are going to have our glowing orbs. And for that, we're going to need white. So I'm going to take the white that I just put onto my palette for the other step. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to very carefully work this white onto these balls. I'm going to try not to get paint anywhere I don't want it, because most of the area around these balls has been completely finished, or nearly completely finished, and I definitely don't want to have to redo any large section. And so I'm just stippling this in, and I probably could have at an earlier stage, when the brush had more life in it, I probably could have come in here and just kind of brushed it on, but as is, it's pretty scary to try and get this brush, because you can see how rough that looks. I've got, pieces of it going all over the place. So it's somewhat difficult to get that to not touch stuff. But for this layer, I definitely want to try and keep it exactly onto the ball here. A little bit's going to be okay, any more than a little bit, and I think we're going to consider fixing it. So, yep, just pushing that in there. Trying to find the best side of my brush here to work this in. Alright, here we go. We're going to actually clean the brush out, because it's very, very frayed right now. I'm going to clean this brush out, and we're going to get some paint just on the very tip here, and then we're going to paint pretty bravely here. We're going to go in here for this center ball. And so there's paint just on the tip, and we're going to push it right in there. Oh, and I'm going to bonk that just a little bit. There we go. And now we're going to paint bravely. We're going to do the same thing. Going to come right in. There we go. So is it perfect? No. Is it livable? Yes. And that's what we're looking for. So we now have some white paint on that as well. We're going to push out most of this paint, and we're going to come in here, and I'm going to stipple just around his eyes. I'm going to build up some white right there, because we are going to have a glow effect right there on his eyes. And I'm going to pull right in here, because we're going to have a glow effect right here at his chest. Underneath, so we're going to have glowing right there and right there. Okay, so just a little bit. We don't want to go too crazy. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull out our next guy, the minion. So I've gotten just a touch of white paint here, and I'm going to work this ball as well. So let's get right in there. I'm going to turn the brush to the best side, the side that is least likely to get paint everywhere I don't want it. And we're going to go just right in. And this, I'm using a pushing motion here to try and push the bristles towards what I want. It's just too damaged now to get this to really, have a sweep like I normally would on it. Alrighty. Have this ball in here. That is my phone. I meant to put that on silent, but unfortunately I did not. Alright. Okay, so we have that. I'm going to wash the brush out again. And the reason we're doing this is we only want paint right on the end of this brush because it is in bad shape. So we're going to get just a dot of paint here. Just testing it here. All right. And now we're going to come in and we're going to give him his white eye very, very carefully. Just a little bit over on purpose. So I'm now moving the brush right to left so I can get a little bit of a glow effect in there. And the same thing here. I'm going to come in and I'm going to stipple down in there. And we're going to have just a touch of glow effect. So I knocked out most of the white, and I'm going to spread that in there so that he can have his glow effect. Nice. All right. So I'm going to bring it just to the top of this, just to the top of that, and then this right here will also get just a little bit of white, because that's going to be the glow effect there. All right, and he will have just a tad over here because of the blade. So I'm going to put in just that little bit right there at the very top and on the side of his head, just right there. And keep in mind, we still have to come in and do some of our highlights for this gold, which are going to be pure white. And so I actually am going to come in and do some of that now. And this is just stippled in here in some of the lightest parts. And I'm just smoothing that in with my finger. Coming down here onto the staff, we're going to do the same thing. So it's just a very small amount of white paint. We're just going to bring that onto here and onto this area here. Same thing, just going to give it just a little bit here. We're going to hit the very tip of this with white because that makes sense. I'm going to give it just a touch there. All right, just the tips here, same thing. All right. He's looking pretty good there with this ball here. We're going to strengthen that effect towards the top of the ball by adding some more paint. And towards the back here, same thing. Mostly we care about it right there though. I'm not going to mess with his eye because that's a little dangerous-y. We're going to come in here on the Silent King, and since I have him right here, we're just going to go ahead and strengthen that up, push it anywhere it needs to right on the front there. Mostly concentrating it on the top there. I'm going to wash out here. Pick up a little bit of white paint, just a touch, and get it on the back here and strengthen that. And I'm going to come in from this angle. And so this will have just a touch of this glow effect coming from the inside here. So I'm just adding that in so that it's there for me. It doesn't need a lot at all. And I'm not going to mess with his eyes or his area underneath. And we're going to move on to the next guy. He has one here and his eyes and his little area underneath him. So we're going to come in for our pure white, which we need a bit more of. Right, grab some of that white in here. Not a ton, but just enough. We're going to work that onto this ball right here. And I'm going to use kind of a pushing motion to get this in. Not generally what you'd like to do to get paint places, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So same thing here. I'm going to use a pushing motion to push this. I'm going to get you a little more centered. Push this towards the edge. I still want a nice dark transition at the edges here to help define this. So I'm not going to push any further than that. So we're going to come in here. He does need his white highlights here for his gold. And we're going to put that in right now because we're getting towards the end here. All right, we're going to come to the shoulder and this top area here. We're just going to stipple that in some. Alright, just adding these highlights here to the shoulder area and to the staff. Just on this topmost piece here, same thing to the back. We won't see too much of this part of him, but that's okay. And now we'll need to do the same to the Silent King here. Saving him for last because I want to be the most careful. And then I'm going to do that, pull down, the same thing here. Pull down, going to catch just the top of the knees here. I'm not going to put any on the feet. I'm going to come here, pull down. Just some little swift motions here, right in the middle of all that. Same thing for the arm, and that. The staff. The top of the staff here. And we're going to come across his back here and hit some of this. Pulling down here, just so that the very tips of this get it. It's a little bit of fuzz from this brush as it slowly dies. That was a lot there, so we're just going to blend that in. Alright, there we go. He is looking good. And you can see here now we have the three with their first bit of white on the balls. These two actually have quite enough. This one I am going to strengthen towards the top again because this provides visual interest. So we're going to come in, we're going to give that just a little stronger right there. Same thing here, a little bit more towards the top. There we are. He also will have a glow effect further in, so I'm going to push in here just a tad, and he'll have it around his eyes as well. So I'm going to go back and forth until I just grab his eyes and that area down there. So this is going to be a lot softer, whereas the top part where it has the reflection, that's a little stronger because that tends to be a little bit a little bit more stark a difference between the two. All right. So while these guys completely dry, let's just going just back and forth here. I'm going to go ahead and pull back down the Meniers, and I'm going to pull down our throne, which we should be able to finish momentarily. So I'm going to start with the Meniers because they'll be easier to see. I'm going to go ahead and grab our paint here, which is right over here. I'm going to put this paint on the shaker, and then I'm going to mute you real quick. Alright, so we have our paint. We're going to go ahead and pull that onto our palette. I'm going to check and see if any of this is wet. This appears not to be. This brown is certainly not, so we're going to go ahead and just put directly on there. None of this paint should reactivate. It's not the type of paint that it is. So I'm going to grab some of that, put it right there, knock most of it off because that's quite a bit, and we're going to come in here and we're just going to get that on there. And so we're just going to put it on the white and the grays that I just added a moment ago. And now that fuzzes that up real nice, which is exactly what I wanted. So we just got there with one little bit, so I get some more on my brush, bring it in, and a little too far away for you to see. So I'm just putting this over the white that I just added. Not a ton, doesn't need to go crazy, but it fuzzes the bottom exactly like I've done here. So let's go ahead and work that in. So here I'm going to go for something a little bit stronger because this is a lot more lightning. And I'm just checking my brush here to make sure I don't have any white paint on it. I don't, which is great. That means this all kind of dried enough. And so I'm going to come in here, get this paint into place, and then we're going to pull outwards from this in just a moment with a little less paint. And that should help complete our effect. And so this allowed us to clean up the area that we were working in. It made sure that, you know, even though we got some of the basing material on this, it was not a big deal at all. All right, so from here, I'm going to pull this out just a bit. Not everywhere though. Basically, I'm just pulling the paint from this outer area, or from the inner area towards the outer area, making sure I catch mostly the tops of things, and not everywhere. I am leaving some of that gray exposed. And so this should give us a nice, visually interesting effect that we're going around it with, but you can still see some of the lighter areas in between, which is exactly what we want. And I'm just hitting up any of the areas I think could use just a tad more. All right, and like I said, we don't want this to mix, so we're gonna let it totally dry here. But I am gonna come in here with our tufts while that's drying. So we're gonna be using these tufts by Citadel. And we're just going to be matching these other tufts. And I want to get these on here because I'm going to add a little bit of paint to them as well. So you pull them off here with your tweezers. I'm going to reorient this one. And they have a kind of gel look underneath them. And they really get on quite nicely. So I'm just going to apply these around. And then we're going to put some of this transparent paint on the side of this that is facing the lightning. Just kind of vary it up, get a few different bits. None of this has to be in any particular order, rhyme or reason here. Get another kind of larger piece back here. And I'm just doing this as I feel like. No particular rhyme or reason. So I'm putting this on. There it is. So those are all on. That seems fine. Just looking around it. I don't want to go too crazy here, and I don't want to have too much in front. But now what I'd like to do is grab some more of this paint, and we're going to paint the side of these that's facing. So I'm going to grab that like that. Put that in here. Wipe some of it off because that's too much. And we're just going to come in on the side that's facing it, still too much, that's facing it right here, and we're going to work that in. So basically, the half of this bush that is facing the lightning will have the glow effect on it there. And hopefully you can still see what I'm doing here, and just grabbing some of this paint, wiping some of it off, but making sure I get the half that is facing to have the glow on it. But I'm leaving the half that's facing away without it. And if I see any of this kind of build up to too large amount, I just remove it there. All right, there we are. All right, so now we have this nice effect. Now I have put this into this pot over here, so when I mix up additional paints, I want to make sure I don't touch, I don't put my brush back into the pot that I had with the fluorescent dye, because that's going to create problems for me. So what I want to do here is I'm going to get some black now. So these are actually totally done. That was just all that needed was to fuzz the edge. And so I'm going to go ahead and put these away. And to finish off this, I am going to paint the rim because I now am done with the throne. And all the rest of the work here is just going to be done up on top, so I can very safely do this. So we're going to take some Army Painter Matte Black. Just going to put this on my palette. I'm going to add just a touch of water, not a lot, from the pot that does not have the fluorescent dye in it. And I'm going to wipe out my brush a little more because I can still see some of the dye coming out of it. So I'm going to make sure I get as much of that as I can. Touch it, wipe out some of the water, and then go in and get some of this black. So I'm going to try and hold this the best way I can, but now I'm going to come along the edge here and try and make smooth, long strokes so that I do not have big brush strokes along the side. And I'm going to slowly turn this in my hand as careful as I can. It's important you do this in a few different steps. This way you will be able to have a nice smooth edge. So you don't want to glob this on because it'll definitely show in the final product. And it does need to be fairly thin. Otherwise, again, you'll see the brush strokes here. So I'm just going over some of this area that went over. I could have, in one of these other steps, actually gone back with a razor knife or with, just possibly my fingernail and popped any of these little bits that hung over off. But I did not bother doing that with this. This is so big, I just don't think that's going to be a problem here. And because we are going to be painting it black here, this should really cover it over. Alright, now we're going to let that dry. And as soon as that's done drying, we'll come back and we'll put one more coat on it, and then it will truly be done. I'm being very careful here, washing out this brush next to this throne so we don't have any accidents. Now, back to these guys. This white should be totally dry on these. So, now we're going to come back and we're going to put the glow effect on these. The first step is putting it all over these balls to get the glow effect, and then we're going to come back and we're going to strengthen it at the top area. Or I should say at the bottom area. We want the top area to be a little lighter. So I'm just going to grab some of our glow here, and I'm just going to come right onto it here. Trying mostly to keep this onto this ball. We'll spread it later. We don't need to start by doing that. I'm going to wipe most of it out and then come in here and create the glow right around his eye, and then we'll have to come back and fix it later, but I'm going to get some of that glow in there. Again, there's very, very little here on my brush. All right, there we are. So you can see here, now we have the glow effect on the eye, and we have the glow effect on the ball. Gonna grab the next guy and do the same thing. This I'm just gonna work in here. Gonna grab a little more of this paint, running low on my palette. And you gotta be very careful with this paint. It does want to separate very, very quickly. It's one of the fastest separating paints I think I've ever seen. It just really does not want to stay together, that fluorescent dye plus the paint at the bottom. Here I'm just going to work on trying to concentrate that color there. And I'm going to wipe most of it out, and then I'm going to come in here and get this glow. It's going to be subtle across this gold, but it's still going to be there on this guy. So we're going to come in here, we're just going to get it right there around the eyes, and we're going to have the glow just very subtly on the inside here. Excellent. So now we have this, and let's take care of the Silent King the same way we have been doing that. So we'll just get this onto this ball, Get it all over it, and then we'll try and concentrate a little bit more at the base where it's always darker on our particular Necrons. All right. And now we're going to come in here. I'm going to remove most of that, and then I'm going to come in here for this. And that effect will glow just along the outside there. There we go. Same thing in the back. I'm going to have this effect down in there, so I'll make sure I get all the way down in there. All right. Nice. Now, if I had a nicer brush, I would come in here and do a little more work on that. But as is, we're going to come over here. I'm going to brace him from behind. And we're going to have just a touch of this glow paint there as well. And in here, we're going to just touch that around. All right. So now we have the glow effect on the eyes. We have the glow effect here. And now all three guys have their glow on those particular bits. We're going to let that dry. And as we do that, we're going to do our final bits of work here. So I'll come back in a moment when I'm ready to do these, when I'm ready to put the glow effect on this blade. But what we're going to do is our very traditional power sword type of effect. And before we do that, though, I'm going to come and check on this. This is not entirely dry. You can see it's shiny right there. So we're going to let that set. No reason to rush that. So let's start with this guy. He has the simplest blade. It is on both sides, but this will be the simplest to do this effect on. What am I going to do? The blade is black. I'm going to go back and forth from side to side, skipping from center to the bottom, and I'm going to put in a kind of, not a glow effect, but a shimmer effect. And so it's going to be similar to what you see in the Silent King here, but it's going to just be a little bit stronger. It's going to resemble more of a traditional kind of power sword. And the reason I'm doing that is exactly what the rest of my Necrons have. So this is a matching what I got kind of thing. But before I do this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to replace this palette here with a fresh one, because I am going to need to mix up several different colors of paint so they can be slightly wet blended as I go. I'm going to mute you real quick. I'm going to grab some more tinfoil and I'll be right back. All right, so here we are. So how are we doing this? We're going to have quite a few different colors, probably about 5 of them, but they're all white to black. Then once we're done doing this, we're going to end up putting, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my palette here, and I'm going to drop him right on the stairs, just like that. And so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start with black, and then I'm going to have a little bit of black here, and then I'm going to grab my white. I'm going to have pure white here, and a little bit of white there. And so basically what we're trying to do here is make a gray from very, very dark to very, very light. I'm going to start in the middle by mixing these two together. So we're going to have a 1-to-1, and then I'm going to pull this way, grab some more white into it, going from there, and then I'm going to grab this over here and pull it in there. Now I can kind of see the various levels that I have, right? And so I don't want any of this to be particularly like crazy strong, and so I'm just going to go until I see it work its way into being a nice transition. So now I have a nice transition to pull from. So I'm going to wipe that out, and you can see that's all I've done. And I'll continuously do this. I have to keep working it. Basically now I'm going to start with this darkest gray area over here. And you can see I have this piece. This is a fairly small piece here, so I'm going to go light. So light over here, dark, light. So I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to have 3 different points on this. So it'd be easier just to kind of show you what I'm going to do. So let's start here. And I'm going to wash this out because I do want to start pretty bright. Okay, so here we are. So we're going to come in here with this. So we're going to have light right here. And it's going to be light down here on this bit. Then going in here, we're going to have light in this center area here. And so we're going to build that up just a little bit. So brighter, brighter, brighter. All right. Now we need to blend this in. So we're going to go one step down. I'm going to grab the gray that's next to that. I'm going to come in, and I'm going to come into the edge here, and I'm going to blend that towards black. And I'm just going to keep going in this fashion. And then I'm going to go down here. I'm going to grab a darker gray. All the while, this is kind of wet. So it's kind of wet blended in. And then we're going to go quite dark, but not quite black here. So we're going to pull this into there. Same thing over here. And so we're just going to work this until it's very, very dark and very, very light. So we're going to pull some of this. So we're going to go to pure white over here in kind of the middling area. And we're going to keep building up these colors. Or I should say these shades. They're not really colors. We're going to keep building up these shades until we have this the way we want, which is going to be where there's a nice transition over from it into these other colors. So that this seems to be almost a kind of glow all on its own. And I'm just going from one of these colors to the next just to pull that just across so that it does blend. Oh, I am way out of the frame. My apologies here. You guys will get to see the next one, I guess. But all I'm doing here is adding more and more paint, strengthening the colors at their core to the white here, and then moving down my palette, grabbing the different colors. So that's a little bit grayer color. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to add the gray as the transition in here. So any place I see it going too sharp, I just grab that right there. And for that, I did barely touch that. I'm going to move that with my fingernail. There we go. So it's lessened. All right, and I'm going to come over here and grab this darker color. I'm going to come in here for our very darkest areas. We're going to strengthen that. And that really is what's going on here. I'm just putting paint in these places until they are the strength that I want them to be, blending them through using a stippling motion to kind of push them around until I'm happy with them. This is basically how I do all of these. And so now you can see it looks like this in grayscale. And what'll end up happening in the end, and we're going to turn it around and work on this other side, but we're going to reverse it. So here is light. So on this other side, we'll want it to be dark, light, dark. And so I'll go ahead and make my mark right here so I know. So that's that side, so that was dark on that side, so it's going to be light on this side, and then this will be like that. All right. So now you can see how I start this off. So I just put those marks in there so I'll know what's going on. Make that pretty strong here. Same thing, I got to be very careful not to like poke bits of this that I don't want poked. So I'm just building up this white here on this to basically a pure white in the middle. But making sure to leave that dark area. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to grab some of this gray. And now we're going to come in and we're going to start blending this gray out here. And I'm not sure how I'm going to get in there. Like that kind of? Yeah, that's a tough one. We're going to pull that in there. And we're going to come further down. Grab some more of this darker gray. And we're going to just transition this gray into... I might not be able to actually reach down in there without doing more harm than good. So that might have to just stay. And then I'm going to come over here for some very dark black color. I'm going to come and I'm going to kind of blend this in just by stippling. Stippling really is kind of the magic technique. It allows you to get away with quite a lot. Alright, that's kind of good down in there. I'm not sure how much I'm actually touching the rest of him. But we're going to grab some of this. We're going to come in. And we're just going to keep touching this until it really blends the way I want it. And honestly, that's pretty good. That is pretty close to what I want on this effect. I do want to strengthen the white over here. So let's come in with a little more here. And just stipple that on just to strengthen that. And that's why we keep coming back after it's dried, just to get an idea about what it is. Yep, I like that. I want a little more white here for sure. Alrighty. Yep, so you can see we're going to repeat this effect across the rest of these models. And then once this is all done and dried, we're going to go over this using the Tezzeret Glow again. And so then that Tezzeret Glow will be on this, it'll look like it's a glowing thing, and we'll come back and we'll edge highlight it with something like an Arid Earth, and then the very, very tips of it will hit with a pure white. So, now to do this a few more times. So in this case, we're going to choose for this part right here, so I'll just go ahead and stick them in real quick. This way we can work from it. So that's going to be white on this side, and then we'll have the white in this case actually be right there. And then maybe what we'll do is just have like that kind of be a larger white area, and we'll actually leave that dark down there. I kind of like that. Maybe on both sides on this guy. So we have this to be the pure white right here, and then for this, you know what, I'll actually do it the opposite on this piece right here. So that can be the pure white on there. So grab that, we'll just strengthen this color in here. Same thing there, just strengthen that onto there. And again, this is all just wet while I'm working with it, and that's what you want. You want it to be able to kind of blend into itself. And now we're going to grab some of this gray. So I'm going to grab a little black over here for my pile. And so we're going to just lighten that up. There we go. And we're going to come in and we're going to blend. Oh, I'm out of frame again. My apologies. We're just going to blend. Same thing here. We're going to come to the edge. There's too much paint on my brush, so we're going to blend in here. Going to blend in here as well. Same thing there. All right. I'm going to come further down here and have a darker gray. And we're just going to blend this in. This is not nearly blended in as well as I want it to be in the end. So this is just giving you an idea. We're going over here. And we're going back. Grab some more of the lighter colors. Now, should I be doing this on a wet palette? Probably. That's almost certainly should have been the case. But you can see here it is you're very much able to do it no problem, even without a wet palette. This is something that you can definitely do. You just have to keep up with your water, which admittedly is a little more difficult without it, because you can see this really wants to dry out very quickly, and so I am kind of having to massage it quite a bit here. Yep, you can see I'm just pulling back and forth in here, trying to get it where I want it. Yep, really like where that's ending up right there. Same thing. Same thing there. We're going to strengthen this white here, so I need to get a bit more white. Here's watching me go back and forth on my palette here. Again, not exactly the technique that you might want to use on these guys, but because of the limitations with the brush, in this particular case, this is not the worst way of doing it. Let's get that in there, get that in there. Alright, so that's going to go there. I'm going to blend the edge of this just a tad more. It's a little strong right there. Same thing here, blend that. This is just about continuing to blend this until it's the way you want. And you can see that's starting to look very nice. I'm going to strengthen the white in the very center here. Same thing there. And every time I do this, I end up having to go and blend just a little more. There we go. All right. So that's pretty good on him as well. So just so you can see the two we've done, this is just a very standard technique for doing this. This is nothing particularly new or interesting, but it's just about slowly blending these until you get what you're looking for. Let's go back and blend that just a little more, make it a little smoother. So sometimes when it dries, I'm able to see it just a little bit better. So you can see kind of where that transition was, and I'm just dabbing in and fuzzing that transition just a little more. So yeah, I like that quite a bit. And you can see I got a little bit of it on the stone. This is okay. I'll come back in with a little bit of... Actually, you know what? Looking at that, I'm actually okay with that on that stone. That actually looks fine. I'm not going to hit that with any of the glow effect, so it's going to be fine. And now we have Cesaric. His is a little bit bigger even than these. So what I'm going to be able to do is I think get away with 4 of them. This brush is a little large for this, but I'm still going to attempt it here. So basically, we're going to go light, dark, and then we're going to skip a space here, so that's light, that'll be light. We'll have light here, and then we'll have light on this side and light down here. And so then on this piece, we're still going to at least attempt to do 3, I think. So 1, 2, 3 at the very bottom. And then we're going to go opposite. So light, light, light in the middle. There we go. All right, let's take a look at what we did over here. So we had light up here. It's going to be dark over there. So same dealio. So we're going to put the light there. We're going to skip that one. We'll move to light here, because, yep, that's the opposite. So we'll have light there. We'll have light here. We'll have the light be there, and then the light be here. All right. So I just like to go back and forth and make sure I can see that that's where it's going to be. Nothing is worse than putting this in, spending a bunch of time, and realizing you've mixed up the orientation, and now it's just weird looking. So let's come on in. We're going to smooth this all down, create a nice white area here. Same thing here. That way we can have something to work with, something to blend out. There we go. Same thing here. We're just going to fuzz these edges. That's all we're really trying to do, is make sure that nothing is too strong and doesn't seem to flow into the next. Okay, so we're going to come in here on the back and do the same thing. Just fuzz the edges, give us a place to put some of our grays. All right, same thing over here. We're just going to fuzz the edges. Give us a place to kind of put our grays in. So we're kind of getting that started, but we've established the lightest part for sure right in here on each of these bits. All right, still here. We're going to move that around a bit. Same thing there. All right, so now we're going to come in with our gray, which we're going to make here because it is almost certainly dried out. So we're going to grab some of that, make a very light gray, and we have something to work with. Add a little water to that. Yep, same there, too much water. Grab some of this, and let's come in. Let's get some of that gray going. Same thing here. We're just going to fuzz the edges. And if we get a little too much, that's okay. We're going to come back with our pure black on this. And so we're going to focus just on one side here. Getting grays down in there. We're going to get a darker gray here. Bringing in our black. We do need some more black here. You can see it is difficult to control the moisture content here, but I'm just showing you it definitely can be done. So this is such a small area here. We're going to come in, and this gray is going to kind of go over the black, but that's okay. We'll come back in a moment with our black, and we'll bring that all back. And so this area here, I'm just trying to get right to it. And then we'll bring our black back in just a moment. This is just to help get us moved about in there. Come back to our white. Come in here with that. We're going to blend these areas. Just with our grays. All right, we're going to get all that moisture out of there. Grab some of our black, knock some of that out. We're going to come back with our black here. Especially in our darkest areas. So what really makes this effect work is that your darkest areas are black and your lightest areas are white. And so it is the juxtaposition of the two, so close to each other but with a transition, that really sells this as being a really cool effect. And then you bring it all together with your edge highlights. All right, have some of that bleed in just a little bit, so we have a little more. There we go. Same thing here. Just going to pull that in just a tad. All right, so now you can really see that's starting to look really good. We have those transitions. We're going to pull to the other side and do the same thing. I'm just going to get that black off right there. And I'm going to be very careful not to mess up the other side by touching it a whole bunch. So I'm going to hold the edge here if I can. Grab some of this white, come in, strengthen that, and then just pull it around so that this white really is where I want it. Same thing there, strengthen that, excellent. Now I'm going to make a gray, a very, very light gray, just like I did the last time. I'm going to pull all that moisture out because that was too much. I'm going to come back and we're going to come in. And it looks like I'm going pretty fast here. I do have to because, again, we're kind of wet blending this stipple effect. And if I let all this paint dry, it really is not going to do what I want it to do here. I do need that help from it to get it moving in place. So we're going to go with just a little bit darker gray here. So we're going to have a little white, a little more black than white. And this gray right here, a little darker than that. All right, there we go. We're just going to pull that in there too. Same thing here, just before. We'll have to come back and fix it, but that's okay because we're going to have too much of it around where the black should be. But we'll come back with our black and we'll fix that. We'll blend this into our lighter colors here again. Up right into there. Yep. So this is just not being afraid to get in there, push this color around, really go to either side here to get the blend. I'm going to grab some more of this black. I'm going to knock a bunch of it off, but I'm going to strengthen the area in the middle and on the sides here. Same thing in here. I'm going to strengthen that black color so I have more to pull from and work with. Maybe pull a little bit of that in. Yep, a lot of moisture in the brush. A lot more than I want. There we go. Same thing here. Pull that in. Stipple that in as well. We're getting pretty close here to being done. So we're just coming in, making sure we have some really nice blends here. Really want to strengthen that there. That seems to be struggling just a tad. Grab some more of this gray. Push that gray in there. Yep, and this is just going back and forth until you like the way it looks. And so I'm getting pretty close here as I pull some of that gray in there. Same thing there. Have that gray. I'm less kind of worried about this area down here at the very bottom where you can't hardly see it. That's not going to really be an issue, I don't think. So let's take a look and see what this looks like as it is. I'm going to get a little more white. I'm going to fix an area here that just needs a little more blending. Get a lot of that moisture out again. And come in here, just going to stipple some white here. Make that a little stronger. Yep, same thing right there. Just kind of blend that a little nicer. Same thing for that white. Yep. Pull some more. That really seems to struggle right there for some reason. Let's pull that in. All right. So there we go. So each of these guys is going to get those. And the Silent King has a little bit nicer treatment. You got 4 different highlight areas. Nice. So, how are we going to highlight these blades? Well, we can't use the edge of this brush because it looks like this. So, that's not going to work. But what we can do is apply an extremely, extremely light dry brush to the edge with almost no moisture and almost no paint. And so that is going to be, I think, the only way to pull that off. And it's worked in the past, so we'll give it a try here. Now, this guy should be yes. So that's going to be ready for our next. I'm going to put this in its own separate cell here, just because I don't want to get any gray on this. I do want that to be a very pure black. Add some black to my palette. Wash out my brush. I'm going to hold this again to the edge, and we're going to come in. A little bit, yep, that's enough moisture. And then we're going to have nice smooth brush strokes here, because we don't want this. This is not enough moisture, so I'm going to add just a touch more moisture here, because I can see my brush strokes. They aren't going anywhere. There we go. So we're going to add this just to strengthen this color here, as I very slowly and carefully turn it. Continue to very slowly and carefully turn with some good moisture in that brush. That way I don't accidentally leave big brush strokes in. I'm going to keep on going. Yep, trying to keep my brush strokes nice and smooth, using a fairly thin down black so as not to leave big brush strokes. Being very careful not to get paint up onto the model. Alright, and I'm almost done. Alright, now that is it for this. So that rim is done. We're going to have this sit over here and dry. And I'm going to wash my brush out. Alright, we're going to take a look here. That's starting to look pretty dry, but you know what? I am not going to really trust that. Before I move on, I'm going to grab my hairdryer, and I am going to dry that just in case, because, as I've mentioned before, if I try and put that transparent paint over the white and it mixes, it'll look terrible. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in my hairdryer, and I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to just apply a little bit of heat to all of these guys to make sure they're dry. Alright, those are nice and dry. So I'm going to wash my paintbrush out. We're going to get a little bit of our Tezzeret Glow on here, and we're going to glaze that on. Nice and easy. I'm going to shake that, because that looks like it's separated again, because it is the Tezzeret Glow paint. So we're going to get that on, add a few bits, and then we're going to end up glazing this on. So I'm going to remove a good bit of that, and I'm going to come and be very gentle. I'm going to have strokes that go from the inside out, because that's the direction that I want it to appear if there are any strokes. So I'm going to start at the top and work my way out, pulling all the way from the center of the blade to the outer section of the blade. Again, the reason I'm doing this is I'd like, if there are any strokes that are visible, I want them to be in that orientation. So we're going to pull from the center of the blade out. I am moving through the black areas of the blade as well, and if I need to, and I almost certainly will, I'll have to come back and I'll add some black to that area to strengthen that out. So then it'll continue to look very, very dark in those areas. So I'm going to go from this inner area of the blade out, same thing, repeating this. And you can see it really just pops into existence there because, again, we did all the work ahead of time. That's the nice part about doing it this way, is you do all the work ahead of time. Then when you are going to put the final on, there's really not a whole lot of fussing with it. You've put that in, it looks really good, and you're not terribly worried about it anymore. So there you are. There's the Necron glowing blade effect. I'm going to move right along to the next one with not too much paint on my brush, add some in, take it off. I'm going to start from the center of the blade and move my way outwards. I am going through the black. I will strengthen that before we're all done. I'm just carefully pulling from the edge in the center to the edge on the outside. Same thing here again. Carefully pulling from the edge on the center to the edge on the outside. And same thing on this side. This way, if I do have any mistakes and I can see a brush stroke, it'll go with the blade, not against it. And that is for this particular type of blade. There's lots of other blades that you'll actually want to turn your brush the other way, and you'll want to blend in different ways. And so what I'm telling you is just for what we're doing here. Other things might be different. Oh, I accidentally touched the throne over here, but luckily I was able to pull it off with my finger. There we go. So this last little bit here, we're finally on Siraz here. And so we're going to start at the bottom, do the same technique we just did, pulling all of that over there. Same thing here. And on this, I'm just going to push. Not a particularly graceful technique, but that gets the job done there. Same thing here. I am going through those black areas. I will come back and strengthen those black areas out. And we'll do the same over here. I'm going to turn it here. Make sure, whoop, not in frame. There we go. So I'm just coming right on top of there. I'm going to reverse this, and I'm going to start from the opposite direction here. There we go. That's very, very quick. Again, pulling from the inside of the blade to the outside of the blade. And I'm going to catch the edge here, even though that edge is going to get highlighted up. And so that is the effect on his blade. And like I just said, I'm going to wash this out, and I'm going to come in with each of these, and I'm going to just touch the black areas. Whoop, not that much. I'm going to touch the black areas just a tad, just to increase that. Now, I would normally come in and do this with a very, very small brush, so I could have a lot of control over this. In this case, I don't get that kind of control, so I just have to be very careful with how it is applied. Coming in here. So I'm just putting very small amounts of black on the brush. And it looks like I have too much. I actually am rubbing it off. There we go. Come in here. Add that back in these areas. Same thing for the bottom here. Just going to strengthen that black, being very careful not to go into some of these lines that I've created here. And so same thing for this guy. We'll do the same. We'll come down here at the very bottom, strengthen that, strengthen this area right here at the very top. Come in, do the same there. Same for this, strengthen this area. And you will be able to see this. It might not be completely obvious right away, but that being very, very dark next to these other pieces that are very, very light, it will be obvious that this has been strengthened here. And you'll notice it if it wasn't done as well. which is the other side of that coin. This again is just to increase the difference in value between these two pieces here. And so that's something we'll definitely notice. There we go. You won't see it with the black, but I do need to come in with white and do something very similar. But I'm not going to do that until this is completely dry, and then I can dry brush the highlight across the edge of the blade, because then I'm going to know how much further I need to take it before it's done. If I put it in right now, I could very easily overdo it to where the shine on the edge of the blade is going to be way more or way less, and I'd like them to be fairly similar. So I'm going to move these guys back over here one more time. I'm going to bonk that into the throne because that's just what I do. This is now complete. So this throne is now ready to go. I'm not going to worry about putting a bunch of highlights on the lightning under the throne. You're never going to see it. And so I feel like we could spend our time a little bit more fruitfully in other places. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up and out of the way. It is completely done now. And so that I can work on this white here and we can be done with these characters, I am going to go ahead and take the hairdryer again. I'm going to mute you real quick, put the hairdryer on, and then we're going to highlight these out, and then these guys are going to be done. So let me go ahead and mute the line here, and I'm going to grab the hairdryer. All right, after all that hair drying, we should be done. So, where are we at? I'm going to take a little bit of this Arid Earth. I'm going to put this on my palette. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this matte white. I'm going to put it on the palette next to it. And we're going to make a just slightly off-white highlight. Pardon me. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to mix this together, make something just a little warm. I'm going to remove most of this, and we're going to come. I'm going to find the best part of this brush. There's not a lot left. And we're going to come in and we're going to highlight just like this. So I'm just going to kind of pull from these areas here. And I'm going to pull it in right there. Same thing here. We're going to pull from the edge here. I'm going to turn this. Oh, looks like you're out of frame. I'm going to pull right here onto this part to get that highlight in there. And I'm going to do the same over here. So we're going to be very careful. We have very little paint on this. I'm going to pull into that area right there. I do want to still see that, so I'm going to go ahead and put that on there as well. Especially this top area, we want to make sure we can see all of that. Alrighty. That's good for him. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to edge highlight this part of the blade, pulling into there as well and into here for our brightest portions. Edge highlight the blade here, pulling into there, get our brightest bits. Same thing there. Alright, I want a little more right there. Perfect. Alright, and now we have just the right amount, I think, on here. Yep, for this very, very subtle edge highlight. Pulling into these spots that we want to be a little brighter. And down here too. Same thing, we do want to edge highlight this part of his blade. Alright. And that's looking like we've got it done. I'm going to come back and strengthen just a tad these black areas. Just by grabbing a little bit of our black. Because these edge highlights can take a bit of that black away. And we do want to make sure that those areas are really nice and dark. And the same for these guys, just a little touch of the black back on it. Alright, and this is just nitty-gritty details here. Just getting this on here. But I think this is the kind of thing that really makes a difference when we're talking about these kind of models. Alright, so these guys are now pretty good. Let's see if there's anything else that needs final highlights. Might mix here a little bit of a gray color. So now I can hit anything that needs some additional highlights, like maybe here on his hand. Yep. I'm just making sure this all looks good because they're about to end up on, I'm going to give a little highlight to his hand here. This all is going to end up on the getting mounted here pretty soon. So they're all going to go on the throne, at least these two, and then we'll have to work on Cesaric's cloak. So these two guys are now done. So let's get them mounted up. We'll put Cesaric over to the side because if you'll remember, we have one final piece left, which is the cloak. But it's going to get its own mini episode. So let's go ahead and get these guys mounted. So we'll take a look at our reference picture so I don't put them on the wrong side. So it looks like this guy goes on this side and this guy goes on that side. All right. So let's go ahead and work them off of our plinths. So we had this here. I'm just going to get my thumb underneath his feet. Slowly work it up. I do want it to come off. These come from the dollar store. And if you want it to be extra fancy and have the nicest stuff, 3M stuff seems to work the best. It is just sticky enough to where nothing will come off of it, but it does then release when it comes time to be released. Whereas this stuff, you can see I'm having to go very, very slowly. In fact, let's bring him back in the frame for you. And what I have to do is kind of work my thumb under it, and then if I pull up very, very slowly, you can see the bits are giving. They give way here. That's just the very tip of his foot, and I'm just going to take a look, and you can see none of that really stuck, which is great. So how is he going to look on here? He's going to connect like so. So let's see, and it looks like these bits go on here. So I got that, and those line up just right. So I'm not going to glue his feet down. What I'm going to do is put a dab of glue right on the edge of this. And then he should actually be there well enough. In fact, you know what I'll do? I'll put a very small dab on his shoe. And then I'm going to put, so I'm just coming in here. I'll show you guys what I'm doing. I'm going to put a little bit of dab right here. This is gel glue, so it will stay where I put it. And just on one foot, I'm going to put a dot. And that's all that's going to need, because these guys are kind of really, there it goes. They're very small. There's not a whole lot of force needed here. I am going to use this to kind of push his foot back into place, though. Get that guy in there like that. Make sure his got a little force on the back. There it goes. I felt it kind of click and give. And that's what I was looking to do. And you can see right here, we're going to add just a little bit of glow effect on this when it dries. We're not going to mess with him before then. All right, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to push the throne back out of the way. Throne's a little close, I know. We're going to come in here. We're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to push up under his foot here using my tweezer. I have very sharp tweezers here. I'm going to pull this goo away and just work very, very slowly to get the feet undone. And now that it's this far along, I'm just going to pull up one. I'm waiting for that to go. I'm going to help it along here with my tweezers. I'm going to pull down. And now the edge of his staff too. I'm going to pull that off. There we go. So that's one of the big benefits of painting everything black. If I'd have used white, the tip of his staff here, you would see white. And that would be less good. All right, I'm going to test fit here before I do anything else. So he's just going to get pushed in. Yep, like I thought, his hand is maybe supposed to be on the rail, but because I glued it back in place, it's not. So I'm just going to work it until it breaks again, just like that. All right, so now his hand is kind of broken, but not very broken. So now I should be able to get his hand to fall onto the rail. There we go. Yep, so he's touching the rail there. Perfect. All right, so for this, what I'm going to do is exact same thing. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this umbilical. Just a dab, and then just a very small dab on his foot. Doesn't need to be much. I'm actually going to move that with my finger. All right, so now I'm going to push him in here. I'm going to attach him up, and before everything sets, I'm going to get my tweezers in here. This is kind of a delicate procedure for sure. There we go. I want a little bit of back pressure on that foot, so I'm going to push on the foot here. Push on his leg, there it goes. Now that is in. I'm going to grab his hand, bring it around. And so I'm pretty sure I want that there. And this is just guiding this guy in place here. And let's see, let's check our reference. Maybe. Oh, his hand is like down in there. You know what? I want it to be out. So I am going to, again, come in very, very carefully, very gently, with a little bit of this Tamiya Ultrafine, and get this settled right in here with that Ultrafine. If it gets on my paint job, though, I'll have less of a good time. All right, and I know that glue is right there, so I'm going to push that down in place and try and get those umbilicals to lock, which it looks like they did. Excellent. There we are. So I now have these two guys off. So let's take a look. Here they are sitting on. I'm going to bring you guys back just a little bit. So now here they are sitting on their things. This guy isn't actually holding the rail. I realize his finger is just kind of like in a strange position. And so we're going to leave that be. I'm going to make sure this isn't an object. It's not. Cool. All right, so they're going to dry up here. And so these two were on. That's going to leave our last episode to take care of the cloak. And so we're going to, you can see I have this mounted up here so I can do a lot of work to it. You'll never see this part of the cloak because of the way it's going to be on. It's centered and on the back. So it's not possible to see it, which is why I've glued a toothpick to the back here. And I put it on a bit of cork. So that's going to be my plinth to work with this. But in this episode, we were able to finish up all of the glowing effects on all of the people. We were able to go ahead and get them completely mounted up and have their final touches added. And in our next and final episode, we are going to have this cloak completed, which will probably be a mini episode. But after that, we'll move on to something new. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.